what I was Okay, so we're going recording now. So what I was going to say is I've got some electric problems here today, and I'm on mobile hotspot. Now, the second screen, which is what I share with you with the text, is not on battery, it's on electric. So if it goes off in the middle, then that's because we've had another trip on the electrics. At the moment it's working, but it keeps tripping. It shouldn't knock off the internet because I've put it on my mobile hotspot, so we should be okay. Right, we are going to start this week chapter 8 of Shmuel Aleph, one of the most difficult chapters of all in this whole story, and you will understand as we go along why that is the case. It's a very, very complicated scenario here with all sorts of different things going on underneath the surface, which I want, with your help, to bring out from underneath the surface. Let's just talk about where we are holding. And by doing that, let's just have a look at chapter 7 before we go on to chapter 8. Let's just go to the end of chapter 7. Let me share the screen with you, at least temporarily. Okay, you should be able to see the screen now. Yeah, good. Okay, so if you remember, we had, let's just have a read of the last 3 verses, 15 onwards, please, of chapter 7. You're muted, Leon.
Sorry. Samuel judged Israel all the days of his life. He would travel year after year, circling to Beit El, Gilgal, and Mitzpah, and judging Israel in all these places. Then he would return to Ramah, for his home was there, and there he would judge Israel. And there he built an altar to Hashem.
Okay, and we spoke last week about this almost paradoxical situation here of verse 15. Samuel judged Israel all the days of his life, and then it gives us his circuit. I remember Jeffrey using that expression last week, circuit judge, and he goes from Bethel, Gilgal, and Mitzpah. And if you recall, I showed you a map of where those 3 places were, and it was a very small area. It's a small area, maybe, I don't know, 15, 20 kilometers in a radius from where he is. And it's right in the center of the country. And I suggested to you that actually, despite the fact that it says that Samuel judged Israel all the days of his life, I would suggest that from the fact that this was his circuit, he wasn't judging all of Israel all of his life, that the folk up in Naphtali and Dan and all the other places probably had nothing to do with him. And I was struggling, to be honest, to see the difference between the period of rule, for want of a better word, the period of judging of Shmuel to any of the other any of the other judges that we read about in Sefer Shoftim, which was the previous book that we went through immediately before Shoftim, before Shmuel. I can't see the difference. He was his sphere of influence seems to me not to be as wide as it seems to paradoxically be. And I think that we need to just bear that in mind when we go into chapter 8, because I think it has a bearing on it. So with that background, let's have a look at chapter 8. Let's go on to chapter 8.
Can I just say something, Johnny?
Yes. No.
Is there a possibility that another interpretation of those 3 verses, or in particular the middle one. Is there a possibility that as well as him traveling, he was judging Israel all the days of his life, but sometimes people would come to him from all around where the children of Israel were living?
I think that's definitely a possibility. And I would suggest to you that that would be more likely if he was static. If he stayed in Ramah and that was his center of judgeship, for want of a better word. I'm sure that Michael will tell me that isn't a word, but I can't think of a better one. If that was the center of his power, the center of his court, if you like, and everybody then came to him, well, then I would accept that. You've got the Sanhedrin in Yerushalayim, for example, the great Sanhedrin, and that was that. But the fact that he's going around the circuit, it's telling us that he went from place to place. Let's just have a look at the pasuk again, exactly what it says. It says, and from year to year he would set forth and go around to Bethel, Gilgal, and Mitzpah, and he would judge Israel in all these places. So if he's judging Israel in all these places, then that's the area that he has influence over. And if he's judging Dan up in the north, and Naphtali and all the others, and Shimon and all the other places that you're familiar with from our famous tribal map, then why isn't he going there? If he's just static and everybody has to come to him, fine. Or if you're going to say to me, well, there are different circuits, right? This was his circuit, and there was another circuit up in the north, another circuit in the east, another one in the west, wherever it is. Why are we specifically told that this was his circuit? It doesn't make any sense to me. This Pasuk 16 doesn't tell me anything other than that was where Shmuel was in power, if you like. That's how I view it. And that's not to say that your explanation isn't a possibility. It just doesn't sit nicely with me, that's all. Yes, Anita.
It says here in the art scroll that it says, although Samuel traveled throughout the country, the verse mentions only these places due to their greater sanctity and religious significance. Okay,
so they've obviously asked my question, haven't they? They've asked my question and said, well, this why are they telling us these places? Because he judged the whole of Israel. Bethel, Gilgal, and Mitzpah. These would be the places where he would sit and judge. So what they're saying is that these were the courts, if you like. These were the major courts. Again, I have the same feeling that they've asked my question. That's for sure. Personally, I'm not overly satisfied with their answer, and I'll tell you why I'm not overly satisfied with their answer as we go through chapter 8, because I think there are certain things in chapter 8 that we will see that makes my question and Art Scroll's question a strong question, and I think makes the answer that you've seen there, certainly in my eyes, a little bit schwach. But those of you that are comfortable with that answer, gesundheit hate, as they say around here. Okay, so with that background, Shmuel was judging Israel all the days of his life. Either he was judging the whole of Israel successfully, or he was basically just another one of the judges with a smaller sphere of influence, whichever way you want to look at it. And then we come to chapter 8. As I said, this is a difficult chapter because there's lots in here which we're going to have to tease out and explain its significance. So let's go straight into it. Leon.
When Samuel became old, he appointed his sons judges over Israel. The name of his firstborn son was Joel, and the name of his second was Abijah. They were judges in Beersheba. But his sons did not follow his ways. They were swayed by profit they took bribes, and they perverted justice.
Let's stop there and let's go from the top. It was when Shmuel had grown old that he appointed his sons judges for Israel. What does that tell you? What does that pasuk tell you right from the start? Anything scream out at you there?
Nepotism?
Nepotism, I would certainly agree that's definitely nepotism. But let's just go before the nepotism. And we'll come to the nepotism in a moment, Michael, because that's very important, of course. Anything before that?
Well, he waited, didn't he, till he was old.
So he waited until he was old.
He probably wasn't satisfied with his son's behaviour himself.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the things that struck me. I mean, I haven't a son who is taking over my practice. Well, it's not actually quite true, because one of my children is quite involved in the same kind of work that I do. And I've actually handed over quite a lot of the things that I was doing in my medico-legal practice to him. And the reason I've done that is because I think that he is now better equipped to do it. He's taken over quite a bit of my clinical work. I used to be in charge of doing the joint injections and soft tissue work. He's a physiotherapist and is qualified to do that. I taught him to do it. He went on other courses to do it. He's now better than me at doing it, and I've jacked it in. And I don't consider myself to having grown old. I could still do it quite satisfactorily, I think. But he's better at it than I am. And I've seen fit to hand it over to him. I think the point that Leon has made is a very good one. Samuel had grown old. And I think that he had waited until that time because I think he probably thought it wasn't, they were not to scratch. But there's something else in there as well that strikes me. And that is, and I'll see if anybody else has got anything else to add before I tell you what I think strikes me about this particular pastor. Yes, Stuart, first of all.
It doesn't tell you anything about his life up until he gets old, who he married, and what he did, really. It's very vague about his whole life before then.
Yeah, that is true. That is very true. We don't see anything about Samuel. We know that he lived in the temple area, the Mishkan area with Eli when he was a little boy. We know that he judged Israel all of his life. We don't get told much else about it. That is true. That is true. Okay, anything else? Jeffrey, you wanted to add something?
Yes, Shmuel had a particular training under Eli, and he knew nothing else. And he didn't really have a father and son relationship. He had a teacher and son relationship. And I think that when his term came for him to have children, he didn't, because he was so busy judging and doing other things, he didn't have much time for the children to pass on his ways. And they became avaricious. They saw probably that he led a frugal life, and they became avaricious.
That's very interesting, Jeffrey. There's 2 points there that Jeffrey made. And I want to talk about those, both of those points, actually. The second point first, if you don't mind, and that is that he was probably very busy judging and didn't have as much time as he should have done. We've seen that before, haven't we? We've seen that with Moshe, going right back to Moshe Rabbeinu. I'm sure that some of you, Lawrence isn't with us at the moment, is he? No, but this is Lawrence Bruce's favorite shiur, the shiur of Parshat Yitro, where we see that Tzipporah brings back the 2 children to Moshe after a long absence. and he leaves them standing outside the tent, and he takes Yitro inside the tent and starts talking about affairs of state. And the wife and kids are left outside. And we see very clearly that Moshe Rabbeinu was very busy with affairs of state. And we know that his children did not follow in his footsteps. And that's a common thing that we've seen throughout history, haven't we? That communal leaders are prone to give all of their time over to the community that they are leading, sometimes to the detriment of their own family. I have tried very hard to impress upon my own son, who is a community leader, that he must make time for his own children, and that when we were there for Seder night and there were 150 people around the Seder table, literally 150 people, I said to him, you have to make sure that your children are sat next to you, not at the end of the table with the knackers and the machas at the top of the table. No, the kids are going to be next to you at the top of the table. The knackers can be a bit further down the table. And it's very important. It's a very important lesson. And I think Shmuel possibly fell foul of that one. I think Jeffrey's right. But Jeffrey said something else there, which I think is also worth picking up on. And that is the lack of the parental relationship. Shmuel was taken when he was a very little boy, when he was barely weaned, and taken to Eli in the temple. We remember that from the early part of this book. And we know that his mother used to see him once a year, because she used to take him that little coat every year, a new tunic every year. And he grew up under the tutelage of Eli, who I'm sure was a fatherly figure, but he wasn't his father. And more importantly, Shmuel grew up without a mother figure. Now, in the 21st century, we are very, very aware of the importance. I'll come to you in a sec, Jeff. We're very important. We're very aware of the importance of the relationship of parents and children when they're very small, and the effect it has on them, on their life. So I think that's a very astute and valid point. Yes, Jeff.
Eli didn't have much success with his sons either, and I think that would have been noted by Shmuel, and maybe he just left his sons to their own devices. And it's tragic, but he didn't have time to be able to deal with his sons.
Have we lost him?
No,
well, I certainly agree with his hand up. Michael?
Yeah, the other way of looking at it is he never planned for his succession.
Yeah, well, that's correct, isn't it? Because he's grown old. And where do we see that? We see that with Moshe Rabbeinu as well, don't we? Because Moshe grows old. Kadosh Baruch Hu says to him, you ain't going into the land. You have to go up to Har Nevo now, and you have to pass on like your brother did. And what does Moshe say? Moshe, in fact, the Rav quoted it yesterday in his farewell drasha. It's the one and only time that we see in the Torah, Vayedaber Moshe el Adonai. God speaks, Moshe speaks using the word Vayedaber, a harsh sort of speech to Hashem. And what does he say? He says, you need to appoint a leader. Can't just let me die without having a leader. There needs to be a succession. And that's the same thing here. Again, the same thing happened with Yehoshua. Yehoshua also did not plan for a succession. And what happened then was we had 350 years of the Shoftim period, which was basically anarchy, interspersed with periods of moderately successful judges. So we don't see, and this is my point, we don't see a huge difference in the success, in the whole pattern of Shmuel's life to any of the other judges And certainly there's a great parallel with Eli. Remember, we learned about Eli and his sons badly behaved. And here we have Shmuel's sons also badly behaved. The one point that nobody's yet raised, which is what struck me, was when Samuel had grown old, that he appointed his sons judges for Israel. I mean, Michael pointed out this was nepotism, and that's the fact that he appointed his sons. I'm interested that he did the appointing at all in the first place. There's certainly no democracy going on here. There's no vote to see who it's going to be. He doesn't consult HaKadosh Baruch Hu to say, well, who should be the leader, like Moshe Rabbeinu did. Moshe Rabbeinu said to God, you need to create a leader. If I'm going to go, we can't have a vacuum. Shmuel doesn't seem to do that. He just goes ahead and appoints his sons as judges. And that is it would seem from verse 3, that was an error of judgment to have appointed his sons. It could be nepotism. It could be a blindness to your own children's faults. That can be. We see that a lot of the time, don't we? We don't always see the faults of our children. We don't want to see them sometimes, do we? And let's look at verse 2. What were they doing in Beersheba? What's the significance of them being in Beersheba? Remember where he is. He's in the middle of the country. Beersheba is the southernmost border of the land of Israel, basically, at that time. Yes, Jeffrey.
It's also a crossroads. It was an established route, Beersheba. For people going south, they went always through Beersheba, and then people going from Hebron area, they would also go towards the coast to the port via Beersheba.
Okay, can you see the map on the screen, everyone? Okay, so there's Beersheba, the red dot there. You can see down here is the Negev. Parallel is Gaza. And if we just home in a bit further, make it a bit smaller, you can see Hebron is actually not to the south. Hebron is to the northeast. But it was definitely a major stopping point on the way down to Egypt, that's for sure. And Beersheba, of course, was one of the most important cities in ancient biblical Israel. Who lived in Beersheba for a start? Abraham lived in Beersheba. And so did Yitzchak, and so did Yaakov, because we know that from the first pasuk of Parshat Vayetze. Vayetze Yaakov mi Beersheba. Yaakov went out of Beersheba, and so that's a very important town, city in Israel today. You will see the main modern city of Beersheba over here. And here, I don't know if you can read that. I'll go a bit bigger so you can see. It says Tel Sheva, which is the correct name of what most people call Tel Beersheba. That is thought to be the ancient city of Beersheba. There has been archaeological excavations there extensively. If I'm not mistaken, Rose Glaske did some work on Tel Sheva. Am I right, Jeffrey?
You are right, yes.
So the Tel Sheva is a very, very worthwhile place to visit. I can't remember whether we have been there on a Tiyul or whether I've been there on my own. But
we went past it. We saw it from the distance, but we didn't actually visit. Okay,
so that'll be somewhere I think we will take a Tiyul, Bezrat Hashem, when we can restart Tiyulim.
You need to go in the winter.
I've been to Tel Beersheba, and it's a very, very worthwhile site to go to. We could do a lot of Tanachi things there, so perhaps we'll incorporate that. But that's where it is. You can see it's just off to the east of what is today modern Beersheba. So why did what am I talking? There's a Freudian slip. Why did Shmuel send his sons? Let's go back to Shmuel. Why did he send his sons to Beersheba?
because I think it's because it was the close proximity to the Philistines, and wherever Shmuel was, the Philistines couldn't attack Israel. So maybe he had it in his mind that if he sends his sons there, they're not going to come up via Beersheba.
Okay, that's a good theory. That the sons were part of the family of Shmuel. The Philistines are scared of Shmuel. We know that from the previous chapter. So that will be a good strategic appointment. Okay, I'll buy that. Anyone else?
Maybe he was concerned about his sons and wanted to keep them on the periphery for the time being.
Yeah, that's interesting, Michael. That's what I can't remember where I read that now. I think I might have read that in the Steinsaltz. Johnny Halpin's not with us this morning. He normally has the Steinsaltz commentary at his fingertips. I can't remember where I read it, but I did read that as a suggestion from somewhere, that he knew that they weren't really up to the job. So he sort of sent them down to, it's like the guy that's in government that gets appointed minister for ping pong, just to give him something that's not really where he can't do any damage kind of thing. The fact that Beersheba was such an important city would go against that sort of idea. The fact that it's down at the periphery of the kingdom would be for that idea. So I think there's certainly it's an interesting concept that they were judging in Beersheba. And then, of course, verse 3. They weren't up to the job. They didn't walk in his ways. And what does this remind you of? My Freudian slip gave it away just before. This is an absolute, this is a copy, isn't it, of an absolute copy of chapter, I don't know whether it was chapter 2 or chapter 3 of Shmuel, when Eli and his sons were on the picture. Eli's sons, Hophni and Pinchas, they were not good people. They were stealing the best bits of the korbanot for themselves. According to one opinion, they were sexually attacking the women that came to bring their offerings before they went back to their husbands. They were not good. And this, we know what happened to Eli. Eli had a visit from a prophet and said, this is your time's up, mate. And Shmuel has found himself now in the same boat. He has children that have not gone into the right ways, and he doesn't seem to be able to control them in the same way as Eli was unable to control them. Now, we don't see the same punishment meted out to Shmuel as we do to Eli. And I wonder why that was. I don't have an answer to that question, by the way. It just struck me as being very obvious that Eli, we don't know what happens to Shmuel's sons. All we know is that they were appointed judges and they were rejected by the people, which we'll see in a minute. We don't see that they were killed in the way that Hophni and Pinchas were. We don't see that Shmuel's family are given that curse that Eli's family was given, which was that nobody will live to a long life in their family. And I just wonder why Shmuel doesn't suffer the same punishment as Eli. I suppose what we can learn from that is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has his ways, and that everybody is different, and everybody will be dealt with in a way appropriate to them. And we just can't really make value judgments one against the other, because this is beyond our pay grade, if you like. I suppose that's a bit of a cop-out answer, but if anybody has got any suggestions as to why Shmuel did not suffer the same fate as Eli for what apparently was the same misdemeanor, I'd be interested to hear them. David has unmuted himself, so that means that he's going to treat us some pearls of wisdom. Yes, David.
I don't know about pearls of wisdom, but the traditional view is that they didn't actually sin, the sons of Shmuel, like the sons of Eli. It was more like that Shmuel, when he went round the country, he offered his services without payment, whereas his sons were interested in financial gain, not in a corrupt way like the sons of Eli, and certainly not in a violent way, and their promiscuity with women, as in the sons of Eli.
Okay, I'll partially buy that, David. I'll partially buy it. I'll buy the last bit.
I said that is the traditional view.
Yeah, I know you did, and I know I'm beginning to know you well enough to know that was code for I'm not really buying it myself. So I'll buy the second bit. We certainly don't read of any sexual misdemeanors. I'll come to you in a second, Jeff. But I'm not buying the first bit because I don't know how much clearer verse 3 could be. Leon, read it for us again, just in case anybody's missed it.
His sons did not follow his ways. They were swayed by profit. They took bribes and they perverted justice. Okay,
that last two phrases there, vayikhu shochad, they took shochad. We see that word shochad in yesterday's Sedra very clearly. Ki ha-shochad ya'aver tzadikim v'salef. No, what is it, David? Ki ha-shochad ya'aver. I can't remember the exact words now. But it says very clearly that. That's right, yeah. That's right. It says very clearly in yesterday's Sedra. In fact, I've got it on the screen, I think. Oh, no, that's chapter I've gone to, but that's a previous, that's the next chapter. We might not even get that today. But yes, it says in yesterday's Sedra right at the beginning, you can't take bribes. Judges must not take bribes. We're talking about judges. Shoftim v'shotrim tetin v'chol sharecha. Appoint for yourself judges. The next verse says, and they must hate bribery, because bribery corrupts. Bribery turns the eyes of wise people, and it perverts the tzaddikim. And it's very, very clear. And this verse very clearly says, vayikhu shochad. They took bribes. I don't know which part of those two words the traditional commentaries don't understand as being they took bribes. But as far as I'm concerned, they took bribes because that's what it says. So I'll certainly buy the second part. We have no evidence that they were behaving badly with women, but it's very clear that they were taking bribes and were perverting the course of justice. And I suppose that's the bit that we do accept, that there was no sexual misdemeanors as there were with Chofni and Pinchas. I guess that is sufficient difference for the punishment to be different. Jeffrey?
I think that Shmuel, because he did his circuits and so on and so forth, and he realized that the succession wasn't going to happen, he took note of the people's wish to have a king. And he knew that he wasn't going to live forever. And the children of Israel were protected from the Philistines whilst he was alive. But when he was to go, that protection would go with him. And so therefore they needed a king, a warrior king, to lead the people. And I think it became pretty obvious to him that the time was right for that, because he didn't have anybody else in the background to take over.
Okay, I think that you are correct in that that's how the people felt. I am not so sure that Shmuel accepted that, as we will see as we go on in the next psukim. That was a brilliant intro, Jeffrey, to exactly where we're going now. Verse 4, please, Leon.
All the elders of Israel then gathered together and came to Samuel, to Ramah. They said to him, "Behold, you are old, and your sons do not follow your ways. So now appoint for us a king to judge us like all the nations.
One more.
It was wrong. Shall I carry on?
Yeah, one more.
It was wrong in Samuel's eyes that they said, give us a king to judge us. And Samuel prayed to Hashem.
Okay, so let's just take verse 6.
We've lost you again.
Which I think ties in with what Jeffrey was saying. And the thing was, am I still with you?
You threw us for a while, Johnny. So we missed the beginning of what you said.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Hear Leon reading out the verses.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to take verse 6 before verses 4 and 5 because that deals with what Jeffrey just said before. Vayera hadavar be'enei Shmuel. This thing was displeasing in the eyes of Shmuel. He was not happy that they asked for a king. I think that Jeffrey is right that the people saw that the situation was not good. Shmuel was on his way out and there is no obvious successor. We've seen that many times in history, haven't we? Where the leader has not realized that the time is up. I think it happened with Churchill. I think it happened with Thatcher. I think... say again, Bibi, yeah, it happened with Bibi, absolutely.
Ben-Gurion.
Ben-Gurion was another one, perhaps, yes. It's a common thing. I mean, I've never been a leader and I don't want to be one. And the last job in the world I would ever want to be is Prime Minister. I cannot imagine why anybody would ever want to do that job in any country, because automatically 50% of the people at least hate you. So why would you want that? But anyway, that's another issue. But what we see is that power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So when you are in power, not only is there a danger that you might become corrupt, there is a danger that your judgment becomes corrupt, and you don't realize that your time is up and that it's time to move on. And I think that this is what happened here with Shmuel. He was not happy. I think that what the elders of Israel have said here is very reasonable. I think that they have got together and have said, this ain't working. This is not good. We need to do something about it. Shmuel we need to sort of, move him on. And that's what they did now. So I think that verse 6 represents an opposite view to what Jeffrey said that Shmuel realized. I don't think Shmuel did realize. I think that he, and clearly he was not happy with this. And verse 7, when we come to it, will confirm that. But let's just go back to verse 4 for a moment. All the elders of Israel gathered and came to Shmuel to Ramah. Now, you could use this pasuk to both support and challenge my view that Shmuel was not a national leader and vice versa. Because on the one hand, all the elders of Israel gathered and came to Shmuel. So clearly Shmuel does have some sphere of influence over all of Israel because all of the elders are coming. Now, presumably all of the elders gathering together means all of the elders from each tribe, presumably each tribe, including Dan in the north, the very north, Manasseh to the east, etc. All of them presumably will have sent a delegate in this gathering to Shmuel to tell him that it's time to move on and now we want to have a judge. So that would challenge my view that Shmuel was not a national leader. On the other hand, the fact that all the elders came to him and said, we want a king, as opposed to just why don't you appoint a prophet over us? The fact that they use this word a king, like all other nations, we're going to come to that in some detail in a bit. They're asking for a king. Now, for us, we have to understand, for us, a king or a queen, for most of it in our lifetimes, we've only had one monarch in the UK. We're all nearly all UKers here, aren't we? No, we've got a couple of South Africans. You haven't got a king, have you, Morris? No, you don't have a king. Okay, but we have a king. We have a queen. But we're used to the Queen being the Queen of England, the Queen of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, the Queen of the Commonwealth, the Queen of the whole lot. What's her name? Victoria. She was Empress of half the world. So the idea of Malchut, of kingdom, a kingdom of kingship, implies a much wider sphere of influence, sphere of rulership than does a shofet, a judge. It's a different concept, and we're going to have to understand the difference between a shofet, a judge, and a melech, a king, before we can really understand these psukim and the story that we're going to read in the next few psukim. It's absolutely vital that we understand the difference here and the revolution, if you like. I know that sounds a bit paradoxical when we're talking about kings. So this is a revolution, because usually revolutions are against kings. But this is a revolution in the way that Israel is going to be managed and run, because they are saying, we want a king. And we don't just want any old king. What king do we want? Verse 5, the last two words. We want last three words. We want a king, l'shoftenu, to judge us, kachol hagoyim, like all the other nations. Now, one of the things that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has asked us to be is exactly not kachol hagoyim, like all the other nations. Our job in life, as it were, is to be a mamlechet kohanim v'goy kadosh. Our job is to be a holy nation and to be a kingdom of priests. Our job is to be an or lagoyim, a light to the nations. Our job is to be anything except kechol hagoyim, like all the other nations. We are not meant to be like all the other nations. That is why we were chosen, not chosen for favoritism, as is often accused of us by our detractors and anti-Semites, that we think we're better than anyone else because we were the chosen people. No, we are Am HaNivchar. We are the chosen people, chosen for a specific task. Asher Bachar Banu Mikol Ha'amim. We say it every morning, and we say it when we're called to the Torah. Asher Bachar Banu, we thank God who has chosen us, Mikol Ha'amim, from all the other people, chosen us to be different. These two words, Kechol Hagoyim, were very, very problematic in this whole scenario, because the people are coming to Shmuel and they're saying to him, you're old, your sons are not going to take over from you. The system that we've had up until now is not what we want. We're fed up of being judged by a judge, a tribal judge, a leader of partially of the people, who is not a king over all of us. Let's look at the words of verse 5, which is what the elders said to Shmuel. Let's look at them with some care here. Just read it for us again, verse 5, Leon, please.
They said to him, behold, you are old, and your sons did not follow your ways. So now appoint for us a king to judge us, like all the nations.
Okay, let's just look at this last part of the pasuk. Ata, now. Ata with an ayin is now, as opposed to ata with an aleph, of course, which is you. Ata, now. Why now? Well, we know why now, because the first part of the pasuk tells us why now, specifically now, as opposed to any other time, because we're about to enter we have already entered a period of poor leadership. You're too old to lead. You can't go schlepping around the country at your age. And the people that you have appointed, your sons, are not up to the job. So now, Ata, now is the time we need to address this. Now, imagine how difficult that must have been for both parties. First of all, let's deal with the elders of Israel. How do you go to the leader, and let's accept for a moment the traditional view that he was the respected and loved leader of all of Israel. How do you go to the respected and loved leader of all Israel and tell him you're not up to the job anymore? And what's more, your sons who you've appointed to take over are not up to the job either. That must have been very difficult. That's not something they just woke up one morning and said, hey, let's go and have a demonstration outside Balfour Street to get rid of the leader. No, this is something that must have been a long time in the making, brewing up. And I think this word ata, now, which we just sort of, pass over, I think it has some significance. I think that the point in history that this is going on is of relevance. They've had 350 plus years of roaming around as sort of partial lords of the land, only partial lords of the land. Success here, failure there, that cycle that we spoke about in Sefer Shoftim so many times. The idea of anarchy that we've spoken about in the past, and they've had enough. But it's not something I think that just came as a moment of inspiration. Oh, let's go and get rid of Shmuel. No, I think this has been something which has been brewing up, and it's only now when there is no alternative. It can't have been a pleasant conversation that to unseat the leader. I remember seeing Lahavdil, a film. I can't remember what the name of the film was, or it may even have been a mini series on Netflix or something about the last days of Margaret Thatcher's reign as Prime Minister, when all her ministers sort of turned against her, and one by one they came in and told her that time was up. That was the tension there. The difficulty was displayed very well in that program, whatever it was. I don't remember the title of it. You could feel how hard it was, and that must have been what it was like here. And now let's look at it from Shmuel's perspective. How difficult must that be for a person in whatever role they are of leadership, whether it's leadership of the family business, a community, a country, whatever it is, for your subjects, your family members, your board directors, or whoever it is that you are the head of, all gather together and say to you, your time's up, mate. You're past your sell-by date. We all would like to think that we would recognize when it's time to go. But many of us don't know when it's time to go, and we need to be told it's time to go. And I imagine it's not very pleasant to be told that. And I think that this is a pasuk which underneath the surface, this verse 5 here, it's absolutely full of emotion and full of pathos, really. There's Shmuel. The whole of the Knesset have come up to him and said, it's time to go, mate. Time to go. We now want a different leader. And not only that, we want a different type of leadership. And Shmuel's not happy. He's not happy at all. Vayera hadavar b'nei Shmuel, verse 6. The translation here is rather understated. And the thing was displeasing in the eyes of Samuel. It was more than displeasing. It was vayera hadavar, from the word ra, bad, evil. It was evil in the eyes of Shmuel. Shmuel did not like this one little bit when they said to him, give us a king to judge us. Interestingly, this pasuk does not say that it was evil in the eyes of Shmuel when they said, give us a king to judge us, kachol hagoyim. That bit is missed out of verse 6. Verse 5 is what they actually said. They said, set up for us a king to judge us like all the nations. Now, I think that is deliberately missed out in verse 6. The thing that was displeasing to Shmuel was that they wanted a king to judge them. He's not even got as far as Kachol HaGoyim. When we see what HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu homes in on the Kachol HaGoyim like all the other nations bit. Shmuel here is upset about the idea of them wanting a king, and he takes it personally. How do we know he takes it personally? Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu says so in the next verse, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells us that he takes it personally. So verse 6 tells us a little bit more about what was going on in this meeting between the cabinet ministers, if you like, and the leader. They've all gathered up to him and they've said, Shmuel, sorry to tell you, but you're old and your children are not going to take over from you. Now it's your job now to appoint a king. We want a king like everybody else. We're fed up with this. Time to go. And Shmuel is not happy. He's not happy that they want a king because he takes that as a personal slight. Now, that's not a criticism of Shmuel. I think that's a perfectly natural human reaction, which we would all have. And I think that it is telling us, Tanakh is telling us, remember, we're not, we are Oliver Cromwell, aren't we? Warts and all. We don't believe in saints. We believe in human beings, and we believe in learning from their experiences. And here you can see the pain of Shmuel. He prays to Hashem because that's all he can do. He's on his own. He strikes in this pasuk. He strikes us as a very lonely figure. All he's got left, I say that in a humble sort of way, all he's got left is the ability to pray to Hashem. All his closest advisors, the elders of Israel, have gathered up against him and have said, time to go. He's not happy. He doesn't accept it. He doesn't believe it. And who can he turn to? He doesn't turn to Mrs. Shmuel, because we don't know who Mrs. Shmuel is. He can't turn to his sons for advice because they're schlechters altogether. And so who can he turn to? He can only turn to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Vayitpalel Shmuel el Hashem, and Shmuel prayed to Hashem. And again, let's just finish off because we're almost out of time. Let's finish off with the first pasuk of Hashem's reply, and we'll leave it there for us to cogitate on the first part of Hashem's reply, and let's think about how Shmuel must have reacted to that. So he's rejected by his peers, as if you like, by his colleagues, by the elders. He knows his children are not up to the job, and he's just been told it. So even if he didn't know it, he now knows it. There doesn't seem to be a Mrs. Shmuel that he can turn to and ask. He turns to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and he prays. And this is what Hashem says to him, verse 7.
Hashem said to Samuel, listen to the voice of the people in all that they say to you. For it is not you whom they have rejected, but it is me whom they have rejected from reigning over them. Okay,
let's stop there. So this is a pasuk as well, which needs a lot of consideration here. And this is why it's so important when you're learning Tanakh to do it slowly and to almost like slow cook the psukim. This is not microwave Tanakh. We don't do microwave Tanakh. People have I started it actually a couple of years ago. There was a thing called 929. There are 929 chapters in the whole of Tanakh. And there was an organization that started a few years ago called 929. The idea was you would learn one chapter of Tanakh per day. And it was started to finish on the, I can't remember which anniversary of the Yom Ha'atzmaut, but it was one of them, to finish on that day. And I started to do it. I started to learn with Eli Tilson. Every day we did a perek of Tanakh. But we didn't carry on for very long because I kept stopping and saying, hang on a minute. No, you can't rush it. We can't do that. We can see how long it takes us to learn one chapter. We certainly don't do it in an hour. That's what I call microwave Tanakh. Some people like that. It's not for me. And I think that slow cooking Tanakh is so important because these psukim have got so much in them. Let's just have a quick look at this before we finish, and then we'll go into it in more detail next week. Or if it's not next week after the Chagim, I might start some Rosh Hashanah stuff next week. We'll see. And the Lord said to Samuel, listen to the voice of the people. Let's look at it in the Hebrew. Vayomer Adonai el Shmuel. First of all, there you've got the word Vayomer. What's the difference between Vayomer and Vayedaber? Anyone?
Tense. It's the tense, isn't it? Vayomer is a present tense and Vayedaber is a past tense.
No, they're both past tense. They're both past tense. Vayomer Hashem, Hashem said. Vayedaber Hashem, Hashem spoke. They're both the same tense. Yes, Michael.
Well, Vayedaber normally indicates that Hashem is telling somebody, usually Moshe, what to do or what to say. When it says Vayomer, it's more like a conversation.
Yeah, I think that's right. Traditionally, Vayomer is an expression, a more softer expression. Vayedaber is when you're speaking more harshly, as in when you're telling somebody that they've done something wrong or you're telling them off. Or Vayedaber is an expression of more harsh speaking. Vayomer is an expression of speaking tenderly, more tenderly. So it's interesting. Vayomer Hashem el Shmuel. Hashem is saying in a tender sort of way to Shmuel, Shma b'kol ha'am, listen to them. So what's that, first of all, telling him? The people are right. You are old and your children are no good. So he's telling him in a tender way. Listen to the people. Why should you listen to them? Well, actually, they've got a point. Listen to everything that they say to you. Not just listen to them that they give them a king. Listen to everything that they've said. What is everything they've said? We want a king because you, Shmuel, are no longer up to the job and your sons are not appropriate for you to take over. So this is Hashem saying to Shmuel, you know what? They're right.
But they didn't Yomru, did they? They didn't. They actually spoke harshly to him.
Well, did they? I mean, I think, it sounds harsh, doesn't it? It depends how you say it, I suppose. And you could argue that Vayomru over there means that they did say it in as nice a way as they possibly could, let's say. I agree with you, Leon. If you just read it like this, oh, you've grown old, your sons don't walk in your ways. Now we want a king like everybody else, so get on with it. You could say it like that, or you could say it in a much more tender way. Maybe I'm making more of this than there is, but this is how I see it. He says, listen to everything they're saying. And then he softens the blow. Kadosh Baruch Hu softens the blow. Look what he says. Ki lo otcha moasu. It's not you who they have rejected. So that tells us, Kadosh Baruch Hu, of course, knows what's inside Shmuel's heart. That tells us that Shmuel was feeling rejected. He was taking it personally. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is saying, don't take it personally. It's not you that they're rejecting. By the way, where do you see that word ma'asu? Where do you see that word? It's on the tip of your tongue.
Is it business?
No, you're thinking of masav umatan. That's with a sin, not a samach. Ma'asu. Yeah, you all know it. It's on the tip of your tongue. Okay, I'll give you the pasuk before. Odecha Hashem ki anani vatahili li shua. Next verse. That's right. Even ma'asu habonim haita l'rosh pina. It's part of Hallel, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's part of Hallel. Even ma'asu habonim. What does that mean? The stone that the builders rejected, haita l'rosh pina, has become the mainstay of the building. In other words, that is the pasuk for everybody who was ever rejected as a kid and told they were no good, and makes it good at the end in their adult life. That is the pasuk that tells you that things of don't write anybody off. Even ma'asu abonim, the stone that the builders rejected as being no good, haita l'rosh pina, has become the main stone, the mainstay of the building. So it's rejection. So he says here, ki lo otcha ma'asu. It's not you that's been rejected. Ki oti ma'asu. It's me that they have rejected. And then look at the next word in Hebrew, mimloch aleihem. What word can you see in there? Melech. Mimloch aleihem. It's me that they've rejected from reigning over them. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu is saying, why do they've not asked for another judge? If they'd asked for another judge, I would accept it was you they've rejected. It's not you that rejected, says Hashem, it's me. Because I am meant to be the only Melech. I am meant to be the one who reigns over this people. And they have rejected me because they have asked for a king, kechol hagoyim. They want a king like every other nation. They don't want a king that they've got. I am meant to be their king, says the HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I am meant to be the one that reigns over them, and they have rejected me. So Shmuel, don't take it personally. It's not you that rejected, says the HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's me. And we will stop there and carry on next time.
There is a problem there, isn't there, though, Johnny, with the next verse, which we'll deal with next week.
Okay, let me have a look at the next verse, which what I can see is going to trouble you.
At the end of the next verse.
Okay, the end of the next verse. Okay, tell us what's troubling you, Leon, and then we can cogitate it over the next week.
Well, Hashem continues with his words, and he finishes up by saying, so they are doing it to you as well.
So let's just read the whole pasuk then, since we've quoted it.
Like all their deeds that they have done from the day I brought them up from Egypt until this day, they forsook me and worshipped the gods of others. So are they doing to you as well.
Okay.
So bit of a conflict there.
Bit of a conflict there. Kadosh Baruch Hu is saying to Shmuel, it's not you that rejected. And then he's saying afterwards, well, they've rejected both of us, really, haven't they? Okay, let's think about that. And we'll please God start. Well, we'll go back over verse 7 in a bit more detail, and we'll deal with verse 8 and talk about that seeming conflict there next time. Any questions before we close up? No? Okay. In that case, I wish you a Shavua Tov. I will send out some information about various things that we need to think about now that Rav Ido has left us. I'll need some help with various things, and I'll send out, please God, this little video of what I said yesterday for those that weren't able to listen to it. Okay, see you soon.
Thanks, Johnny.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Shavuot Tov. Thank you, Johnny.